So somehow we need to strike the balance between making sure that we make progress every year, and then also work towards this final completely green solution, because the technology to deliver that today is not as mature as we probably all would like.
Indeed. Thank you. And the last one on our panel here is Mr. Markus Buesig, who is the president for Marine and Offshore North Europe with Lloyd's Register.
Yeah, thank you very much. Pleased to be here. Great conference. Sorry about the weather, but well organized. And so I'm pleased to introduce Lloyd's Register very briefly. For those who don't know us, quickly, the German word would be Schiffstüv. So we are actually organizing the classification of ships, but that's only the base work, so to say. We are 260 years old, but we have grown, of course, out of that role to just check whether a ship is seaworthy or not. We are offering today, on a global basis, all kinds of services related to operation of ships, and of course now also for decarbonization and making ships more efficient. That's super high on our agenda. We are owned by Lloyd's Register Foundation. That's a particular interesting spot, I think, within this group here also to mention, because we are actually founding more than 40 projects worldwide with about 100 million plus capital, so that we can drive also the industry, but also our ambition for a safer world and for a safer transportation world from that angle forward. We have a particular hub called Decarbonization Hub, which is engaged then from the practical side. So we're not calculating theoretical curves. Half of them will not be coming true anyway. We try to take a very practical approach, and as you can see here, we have a zero carbon fuel monitor where we try to establish where the industry really is. So we look at the readiness gaps. We see, is the fuel ready? Is the technology ready? Is the community ready? Can we invest and can we grow and scale? So that's a circle here for us, and we provide that in big ships, but also in smaller ships and all various technologies. So we have more than 45 projects, I think, right now running from all kinds of fuels in additional propulsion efficiency measures, in carbon capturing, etc. So this is in the monitor that's been updated, and that's been done for various types of ships, sizes of ships, and we also run a little feeder ship study at the moment in Intra-Asia, which will be released later this year or early next year. So we try to have a practical approach to help the industry to get greener and decarbonize. So, and we have a little study also out, which you can download if you're interested, which looks at decarbonization from various angles of the industry. That will help us also to guide you further. So thanks very much. I hope there was not more than 5 minutes, but anyway, here we go.
Thank you so much. When we talk about clean ships, many of my questions today will actually focus on decarbonization. There are many other issues related to what a clean ship is, and we will surely have the opportunity to touch upon them as well. But this topic interests me hugely, and is something that I spend my days working on, and I have so many questions, and I hope that I will be able to limit myself. But the first question I would like to raise here is that when we look at decarbonization of the bigger ships, it's not only about what we can do on the ships and what needs to be developed for the ships. Here we are talking about the need for a new infrastructure. There's new fuel supplies. There's going to be upstream development of renewable energy systems, etc., etc. The list is long. So my question to you all, or whoever wants to pick this question, when we look at this wider picture of what needs to be in place, what do you see as the biggest challenge currently to overcome?
Happy to start, yeah. I think in the end, if we want to become carbon-free or carbon neutral, I think the biggest challenge is in fuels and also the infrastructure around the fuels. The other challenge around that is also that we have to define, do we have to become carbon neutral or do we have to become carbon free? Because today many of the fuels that we are talking about, whether it's liquid gas or whether it's methanol, yeah, none of them are carbon free. Yeah, I mean, they can be carbon neutral if they are produced in a green way, yeah? But they are not necessarily carbon free. And I think that's where the regulators also need to play an important role, because dependent on what the rules are, where I would say that you need to look from well to wake, yeah? So as such, you know, as long as you're carbon neutral, you definitely make a big step in the right direction. If you would only want to talk about shipping as being carbon free, yeah, then in reality, most of the fuels that are being looked at today are not a solution, because then in reality, you could only look at ammonia, hydrogen, and potentially nuclear. Yeah? And I think it's those type of things where we all have to be a little bit realistic and also make sure that we have a level playing field for everyone. Yeah, and I think that would be the first step, and that's where this whole point on carbon free or carbon neutral is probably something to be clarified quickly, and based on that you can also determine how quickly can you actually get there.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anybody else here who would like to add to my question or to Rolf's answer?
Maybe from my point, it is already what we heard in our last panel from Dirk, that is even today very difficult to get an infrastructure in Hamburg. And imagine then for Rolf ships from big ports to big ports, you need this infrastructure. When the engine is one thing, and maybe they are CO2 neutral, yeah, only. But to have all the infrastructure, all the tanks and all the supply, to have always the quantities, this is a big challenge. Imagine how difficult it is to get it in Hamburg, yeah. But then we as a tramping company, so having almost every day changing port rotation to some ports, then you need this. This is such a big challenge. Yeah, you have to have that not only in the 50 biggest ports in the world you are going to. We're going to 500 different ports. Yeah, not every day.
The call to action, I mentioned it earlier today, but the call to action on shipping decarbonisation that was announced yesterday, an initiative by the Global Maritime Forum. 3 of the panelists here are signatories to this call to action: Kühne, Nagel, Hapag, Lloyd, and Lloyd's Register. And this is a call to action to set the requirements to accomplish full decarbonisation by 2050 through an ecosystem collaboration. So my question to you and would be, signing this call to action, what is your hope that this call will establish?
I would say we signed the call for action because we think we feel the pressure from our customers as we represent the cargo side, and the cargo side is saying something has to happen, and that's why we signed a call for action. But the biggest challenge in this, and I think we heard it here from 2 ship owners, the biggest challenge is this will take time. So besides the technical part, telling people this problem will not be solved in the next 3-4 years. I think this is the big issue which we all have to tell the public also. There are technical solutions available. We don't know yet which ones will be the ones which drive all this, but it will take time. Before this industry totally becomes carbon neutral or carbon free, we talk another 10 to 20 years.
Easily, yeah. I think in reality, you know, a lot of the technologies are not yet there, yeah. And as I said in the beginning, the regulatory playing field is very unclear at this point. And what you need in an industry like ours is long-term clarity about what is actually required and what is possible and what's not possible. To your point on availability of fuel, why would you build an infrastructure around methanol or liquid gas if you don't know if it's still allowed in 10 years' time? And I think that's where, you know, it's not that we are not prepared to spend money on it. Yeah, we are spending a lot of money already these days speculating about what will happen on the regulatory front. That is, you know, good intentions, yeah, but in and of itself, that's not enough. And that's where we need to get into a better dialogue to really say, how does this look long term? And also try to be a little bit fact-based. I mean, I'm really scared every now and then about what I read in the press for people that jump on certain things which they think are good or not good. And when you then speak to them individually, then in most cases, you know, their real knowledge about these topics is rather limited but they rather convey that because somebody else has said it. And I think should be no doubt that all the shipping lines are committed to decarbonization. Everybody wants to pursue the same goal. It's just that we need some kind of framework within which we can work, because our ships are going to be on the sea for 25 years. And that's, I guess, to Otto's point, we will not be able to replace all of them within the next 3 or 5 years.
That brings me to another question, and taking a little bit technological perspective on this question again. The bigger the ships, the bigger the risks. And as we are deploying on this quest to make ships clean and green, we are deploying technologies that may not have had a long history and proven performance over time. And so we also see that the big ships are very fragile in disrupting the supply chain. Just look at what happened in the Suez Canal with Ever Given, and how that is still creating waves. So my question would be, when we are looking at making big ships clean and deploying these new and sometimes unproven technologies, how are we dealing with this risk?
Maybe I can come in here. We have in Lloyd's Register quite a few projects for smaller ships or for super yachts, for example, where a lot of technologies are being tested in a smaller scale, which we would like to enable the industry to use also in the larger ship segment. So that's something where I see I have some hope to be able to use synergies from the one segment to the other. Otherwise, it's indeed a big gamble. And when I look at the shipyards in Asia, for example, and I've been talking to some clients this morning who are about to order some ships, and because of all the commercial interest and the situation right now, the yards are again where we were 2005, where they say, we have this ship, please buy it the way it is, and if you want to change something, we don't really have an interest to do that. And so it's for us, it's an alignment of the industries, of the shipyards, it's of the ship owners, it's of the fuels infrastructure, and everything needs to be aligned to work. So from my perspective, we're looking at all of it at the same moment, trying to make it work.
Thank you, thank you. My next question then would be, if we look aside from the ships, from the actual assets, there is a growing conversation on how global shipping can actually be a catalyst to enable the green shift across many other industry sectors, as companies need to green their own supply chains. Do you agree with this hypothesis, and are you engaging in such conversations?
Yes, we agree. It's very simple. We agree, and I think we can set the stage, this industry. And I believe as this industry is dealing basically with every company in the world, because every company in the world either import or export somewhere. So we see a big interest in this respect, that we start to influence jointly this aspect, that the supply chain eventually becomes carbon neutral. So, and I think the good news is, and it's what we are telling constantly shipping lines, the customers are ready to pay for this. Once we tell them, explain the situation, people understand, especially in the beginning, it will cost more money, for sure. Because the new technology, even the biofuels which are being used today, which are costing about $1,000 more per ton. And the first customers say, yes, we will not get a green environment for free, and it will cost money. So that's the good news, actually.
I was seeing the other day a picture of a group being at Amazon's office saying we want a CO2-free delivery of our goods, and that ideally from next year or something, which is totally an illusion. And I wonder what also the consumers need to understand better in what is possible and what is not possible. And all the container shipping, and Otto and Rolf may have different views on that, but what we are transporting is a lot of consumer goods, where, like I'm showing my age 30 years ago, we might have said we transport a lot of grain and coal to feed the world and to heat the world and supply energy. And nowadays this has quite shifted to a lot of things that maybe the first world countries should ask themselves, do we need all this stuff, or is that the right direction?
Fair enough. Maybe one last point to that, also because this is all about big ships, right? This panel. I think what we should not forget that when we talk about the risk for big ships, then a little bit of what Otto showed also in the beginning. If you look at energy consumption per transported unit, big ships are a lot more efficient than small ships. And if you talk about decarbonization and how to accelerate that, then some of that is simply also modernization of the fleet. Yeah. And if you can sail with bigger ships, you will also almost automatically consume less per transported unit. If you compare the consumption of an old 4,000 TEU Panamax with a modern 24,000 TEU ship, I mean, the consumption per unit is 3 or 4 times more on an old ship than it is on a new ship. And I think we tend to forget that a little bit. And also those type of things help us. And then you can say, yes, that only reduces emissions with 75%. But 75% is still quite a lot compared to what we are doing today. And I think in that context, big ships are on the one hand, yes, they have some risk that you need to manage, but it's clearly also an opportunity to accelerate some of the decarbonization.
Definitely. I have a specific question to you, Martin, because you also have tanker and bulk ships under your portfolio. And if we look into the future, I would assume that eventually your cargo will also shift from being fossil-based, or at least with reduced carbon, synthetic fuel oils or chemicals that have been produced from renewable energy instead of a fossil source, etc. And so with that, could we see that there will be opportunities to be a preferred carrier for the low carbon or zero carbon cargo, and how that could be a strategic opportunity going forward?
Maybe give me the chance to just to make one comment to your last, let's say, answer, that the bigger the ships, the more efficient they are, and that is for certain, let's say, trades, Europe, Asia, obviously the case. But in general, I would say, in general, the assumption is, let's say, a bit different. The assumption is that for every trade, you have the optimum size of ship, right? So if you, for us, for example, we are carrying a lot of wind blades in the moment, and ourselves for the wind industry from some ports where they are produced in Denmark or sometimes in Asia and over the world, For there you have a certain, let's say, optimum size of ship, depending on the lot sizes, or depending on the infrastructure of the port and so on. So, and I'm sure for your container trades between Europe and South America, it is, size, of course, if we all travel with the bus, then of course we are most efficient. But if the bus is half empty, then we are not efficient anymore. So for every transport trade, you have the optimum size, and the size of the ship per se is more following the trade than our, let's say, CO2 discussion. Regarding your question with the cargo, can that be an advantage? At the end of the day, we are a service provider, and our cargo is changing a lot. If you are in containers, then you're transporting containers, but the intake of the container, of course, that was changing a lot, right, in the recent years. And for us, for example, we are nowadays, almost 50% of our revenue comes from the wind industry. 10 years ago, that was more or less nothing. We were highly depending on oil and gas industry as clients. So we are not in a privileged situation where we can choose our customers, I have to say. So in the last 12 years, that was not the case. I have to say, in the recent months, we can be a little bit selective, but that is maybe only very short term. Normal-wise, this is the other way around. We want to develop, let's say, ourselves. We want to be as efficient as possible, to have the most efficient ships. Coming to your comment with to find CO2 neutral main engine makers. We have next week a meeting with MAN. This most likely is doable. And if it's a big ship or a smaller ship, doesn't matter. For every ship, it's a very, very important investment decision. And the owners are ready for that, because our biggest, let's say, threat is our to build a ship, and then after 10 years you cannot use it anymore. So of course, every owner nowadays will consider a ship or wants to invest in a ship which is CO2 neutral, or at least can be CO2 neutral. So with dual, let's say, fuel engines, as Maersk did. This is more or less already said. The problem is not the owner. The problem for me is not the maker. The problem is the infrastructure. The infrastructure and the regulators, which are, let's say, we are not there to incentivize all the ports and to invest in that. To your question again, we cannot be selective of our customers. It's the other way around. We follow our customers.
Thank you. Thank you.
And if I can add one more thing, I think
Yes.
the maritime industry, we will face in future a lot of competition from other industries for the sustainable fuels, because you have the aviation industry who needs sustainable fuels. You have the transport industry, the road, car. They are looking for sustainable fuels, and I think at one point there will be competition amongst those industries. Who has access to these? Because in the beginning, the biggest problem, there will not be enough of this.
Of course, but that's also why you still need to look at energy efficiency as well. Yeah, and that's why I'm saying, rather than sending 6 Panamax vessels from Asia to Europe, you could also send one 24,000 TEU vessel. And I guarantee you, with that, you reduce the amount of fuel that's being consumed significantly. And we should just get a little bit away from that. The only solution is becoming carbon neutral or those new fuels, because before those will be available at scale and before the infrastructure is there, it is going to take time. And until then, we also just need to make sure that we reduce consumption of fossil fuels. And if we can cut that down with 50% or 75%, that also contributes, because then you also have significantly less emissions.
So this morning there were, I think, 71 container ships outside Port of Long Beach. This is both due to COVID-related issues, but also, I think, because Americans are very eager to shop online. And so, yes, we can build bigger and bigger ships, but this depends on that the Americans are buying more and more crap. And so, if we are looking to actually decarbonize, we actually also need to look at this from a systemic point of view. And perhaps it is not sustainable to continuously build bigger and bigger ships because the Americans are buying more and more, but that we might have to look at other ways to create value.
I'm not disagreeing with you on that. My point is a different one. That if we today have 70 ships lying outside of LA Long Beach who carry, say, I think they carry about 400,000 TEU. Yeah? That same amount of cargo could also be carried by 25 or 30 ships that are significantly bigger. No matter how long we look at it, those would reduce the carbon footprint of what is being transported. I'm not saying that they should buy all this stuff. It's just not something that I can influence. I can tell them that they shouldn't do it, yeah? But I'm not sure that they will listen to me, yeah?
Have you tried?
It's just that everybody gets upset that we deliver those goods too late. What I can do is make sure that we have the most modern and the most efficient ships out there, which have an as low as possible carbon footprint as there is. And over time, we then work towards carbon neutral fuels and carbon free fuels to make that even better, yeah? And I'm not saying it's either, I'm just only saying it's not either or, but we should look at both. That's my only point.
And now the situation is actually even worse because of these many vessels which are being laying in front of LA or in front of Savannah and cargo not arriving on time. We are starting to air freight. Right. A lot of shippers now say, okay, we have to now move air freight. And then you talk, when you talk CO2, then you talk a factor of 3,000% more. We are chartering flights now every week because the cargo cannot arrive by vessels, so it has to move by air, and that's even worse. So I rather would have more bigger vessels, which somehow are being managed in those ports, than having a lot of small vessels, and then on top you start of air freight.
Isn't it a bit ironic that in these times with this disrupted supply chains, the freight rates are through the roof? And is it possibly so that this is the reason why Maersk is able to invest in 8 methanol ships right now?
No. No, I mean, yes, freight rates on the spot market are very high today, yeah? But I always point out also, if I look at the first half year, our actual freight rate was about $500 a TU higher than it was a year ago. That is nowhere near the $10,000, $15,000 that are being all the time quoted in the press. And that actually indicates that only a very small portion of the freight moves at those type of rates. A lot of cargo is still being moved at much, much lower rates because those contracts were closed already a lot earlier. And to be honest, I think both Maersk, but also Hapag and CMA and others commit also to different types of fuel, because we all go more for, as you said, dual fuel type engines, because we also generally want to do it better. Yeah, and I think it's a little bit, easy to say this has anything to do with the rates, because it doesn't. Yeah, and I think it's not a connection that we should make.
Very good. Otto, I have a question for you. You're a leading global freight forwarder, and you have a lot of focus on sustainability, and you are providing this carbon calculator for your customers to be able to make more informed decisions on how you are offering to transport. Being a little bit of a nerd, I looked into this myself, and these are average measures from the Clean Cargo Working Group, numbers from 2015. This was before we started to look into novel solutions and decarbonized solutions and maybe wind and so on. And certainly it's not able to identify a specific ship who may have invested in these new technologies. I'm sure you are aware of this yourself. And are you looking at some improvements on how to enable your customer to make even more informed decisions going forward?
For sure. I think the Clean Cargo Working Group, which we became a member of together with a lot of shipping lines, some other larger shippers in the world, in the first phase we all said, let's make these things more transparent. But then they came up and said we will have per trade lane average data sets. And we said in the beginning it was actually good, so we made it transparent how much CO2 per TU, per kilometer, per mile was being used. But we came then to the conclusion the difference is what Rolf was referring to between the vessels, and if you take it in the Trans-Pacific, you have huge differences between a 14,000 TU vessel and a 3,000 TU vessel. And shippers said we want to see the difference between those different vessel sizes. And that's why we said we have to make this very transparent. That's what Clean Cargo Working Group is also discussing. We set the stage a little through our platform. We have talked to carriers, get more specific data in this respect. And we now have first customers who are saying, I will choose cleaner vessels because the difference can be 300-400%.
Thank you. Martin, then I have a question for you. You talked about the... Markus. You talked about the Maritime Decarbonization Hub with Lloyds.
Yes.
And I mentioned to you earlier today that I had seen in the news that you have been awarded some projects. And not talking about the project specifically, but some of them relate to local economic exploration around certain ports that are maybe engaging in hydrogen or in other kinds of infrastructural projects. And so my question is, ports are evidently needed in the energy transition. Do you see that ports are sufficiently at the table in these conversations? And if not, what needs to happen?
Right, yeah, thank you very much. Lots of things are ongoing. Indeed, the ports are part of the ocean economy, as we call it, where we set our focus. And actually now a few ports in the UK have been chosen and have received subsidies and support to make them more carbon neutral or to improve their carbon footprint. We see that indeed it is inevitable to just go punctuality in and have a look at this port, at this infrastructure, a part of the infrastructure. So this is what we are doing. For us it's a big challenge also because we are supposed to write the rules and give some guidelines, what is safe and possible to do and what not. And so we are writing lots of rules, I'm sure, and providing lots of support to the industry for technologies that will never be seen again in 2, 3, 4 years' time, maybe, or will prove to be impossible to use. So that's our challenge. But yeah, we have to do it, and therefore we go into ports, we go in offshore installations, we go in all kinds of things that are connected with the ocean, and yeah, try to play our role and contribute.
I actually have a follow-up question to you, Markus, because you gave me a question before that I didn't understand. So I'm asking you, what do you mean with, is Amazon posing a risk of creating a Tesla moment?
Yes, that was my thought already a couple of years ago, and I'm sure some of you have also had this thought maybe, because when we look at the ships, and I'm a commercial person, I'm not a technology sort of or coming from the technology side, but I'm still fascinated by it, and I think we're still building these ships out of steel, and we do everything the way we have done already for the last 30 years, 40 years, since we came out of coal basically. And so I wonder indeed if there will not be some technology around the corner, and I don't know whether any of the ship owners here around the table are thinking that there should be something new coming. And we heard yesterday from a startup that wants to go with 40 knots, if I'm not mistaken, and sail and kite technology across the oceans. That's, I think, quite a step, but you know, I wonder what will happen. I mean, we see from my perspective a little we see too little in terms of that technology. We have very heavy ships, we have very heavy engines, so whether there is something new around the corner, I would hope so, but I don't see it. So that's where maybe some deep-pocketed American company comes around the corner and says, okay, I'm splashing out a billion or whatever, and we find something new.
Okay. Gentlemen, we have 5 more minutes to go, so I'm going to give each of you a minute to tell the audience what I didn't manage to ask you yet. So, Martin, would you like to start?
So what you haven't mentioned to ask, yeah?
Something that you would like to convey.
Yeah, I think to be in a position to get in, let's say, a carbon-free or carbon-neutral environment in shipping, I don't think, and I'm not a politician, but the owners are not the big point. So the owners will do everything, because we building our ships for the next 30 years, for us is extremely logical. Our next new builds will have a dual fuel engine, and most likely many other owners will decide the same. That is not the problem. The problem are the port infrastructure and of course the scientific, let's say, to have one opinion. And I fear, even I always have the opinion that the private sector should try to bring us solutions. In this case, we need a governmental, let's say, body, yeah, who is, maybe we have to subsidize this body as private companies. In the moment the market is good. I think most owners will let's say, help there. Also the forwarding companies to somehow to incentivize the ports and all the people who have to, let's say, do some research what to do. The owners are not the big point.
Thank you. Markus.
Yeah, right. I would just encourage the industry to stay really interested and focused, try something out. If I look at my team, everybody is so keen to work with new technologies. If a new ship project comes in, it feels almost as if you don't have to pay a salary if somebody can work on a really interesting project developing things. So let's stay keen, let's invest, and try and move the industry forward as a whole. Try and error, try and failing will be part of it, but without trying we will not develop further.
Thank you. Rolf.
You didn't ask what we think are realistic objectives that we could achieve within the next years. Yeah.
So what are they?
Yeah. So I think when you look at 2030 and you compare it to today, I think that a 30% reduction in emissions per transported unit is realistic. I think when you look at 2040, something like 70-ish, yeah, is probably realistic, and 2050 being carbon neutral, not carbon free, but carbon neutral by 2050, I think is realistic. Maybe 2045, yeah. But I think those are realistic ambitions that we could set ourselves, yeah. And then we need to start working towards that, and probably debate a little bit less about whether the target should be 30 or 40 or 50%, but rather try to take the action to ensure that we get to the 30% a little bit earlier, yeah. And then maybe also get a little bit earlier to the 75 and a little bit earlier to the 100. Because in the end, it's more about what we do than what we discussed in terms of objectives alone. But I thought that question was still worth asking.
Absolutely. Thank you. Otto?
And adding to what Rolf said, if by 2050 this industry becomes carbon neutral, not carbon zero, but carbon neutral, by then the world trade, ocean trade probably will have doubled. So that's would be a major step forward. And I think the industry has to become more transparent, because there's nothing greener even today with the fossil fuels than moving something by ocean. And I think the industry is not talking enough about this. And the Kühne Nagel people know this. I always make a joke. Moving a bottle of wine from Chile to Hamburg produces less CO2 than moving a bottle of wine from Italy by truck to Hamburg. So the industry is already doing very well. And if we do the right measures, which we talked about, I think then also society, people, parties will see this industry a little differently, because we need more time.
Thank you. Let's stand up and say thank you to all of you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. You made a wonderful job. Thank you very much. Now we're going to have